Hey there, everybody. Robert Taylor with Wonderscape Creations. Now we are going to get to part two of setting up the inventory plugin and, all of the containers and all that. So let's go ahead and continue on. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure that you have your third person character or whatever your player character is, have that open. And you are going to hit the add button here in the top left for the components, and we need to search for the equipment manager component. So Ninja Equipment Manager. And we have that bad boy set up. And we need to make sure we go into our class settings to the interfaces, and we need to add the equipment provider interface. Once we do that, we need to go to the Get Equipment Manager and Ninja Equipment Manager. We will drag that right into here. Once we have that done, let's go ahead and compile and save. Select the Ninja Equipment Manager, and this is where we can set up the um, a few very important things here. So all equipment container queries and relevant equipment containers query. 1 second. That'll be important down the road, but what we want is the slot socket mapping. So we'll go ahead and select that. And the first thing we need to do is create our slots. So as you can see here, we have slot placed and we have assigned, which we're not going to use. So at least not right now. On the slot, we go to the more actions down arrow right there, add subtag, make sure the source that you select the new subtag, and then you will type in weapon dot main hand. Add new tag, and we will select that. And then for the name, this is what we named our slots and the weapon manager. So I'm just going to come over here, and the main hand is my right hand. So I'm going to copy that, paste that right there. So now it knows to look for that one. The next thing is we want another one. And we'll come over here, and where weapon is, down arrow, add subtag. And this one we will name offhand. Now, obviously, as you can see, the source is already there, so we're good to go there. And now we'll come back here to the weapon manager. S shield is what we will name here. Perfect. Now we need to replace the default weapon manager, as we now no longer need this because we're not using combat alone. And that's why we had to create our own what's called actor component. So that's what we're going to add here now. I don't remember what I named it. Oh, perfect, right here, AC Equipment Manager. So I'm gonna search for AC underscore, there it is, Equipment Weapon Manager. I'll just hit enter here so that it saves that there. And we want to now update the Get Weapon Manager function. So if we come down here, Get Weapon Manager, where it says Ninja Combat Weapon Manager, we will now use this one. Delete that. Delete the Ninja Combat Manager. No, not Combat. Ninja Combat Weapon Manager. Compile and save. And now we go on to the fun new stuff. We are going to create the equipment actors and definitions and the weapon items and the backpack containers. We're going to do all that right now. So we already did everything we needed to. Just as a heads up, the documentation for the guide part to configure the inventory has not been updated to fit everything that we're having to do to make this work yet. Um, there is a documentation page explaining what needs to happen, but this video currently is the only way that's showing it step by step, the best, doing things in order. So we've already changed the class. We didn't change the class. We don't need to change the weapon class to the combat equipment weapon class. We don't need to do that anymore. Um, excuse me. What we do need to add, I believe, let me go to the weapon. We need to go to our weapon to make sure. Blueprints, weapons, base. Come here into class settings, interface, equipment actor interface. Okay, it's already there. So yeah, now we get to go on to some new stuff. Except for... Okay, yes, we are good to go. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure. So now we go back to inventory, and we are going to go to the equipment menu right there. Right click here, go to Ninja inventory, and we want an equipment definition. So I'm going to do EDDA for equipment definition data asset. You name it however you want. And I'm going to follow this to the letter. In my project, I have the sword and the shield separated into their own. And if you want to do that, you can do that as a practice thing between this one and the next one or later on. But we're going to follow this exactly to the letter at this point. So we will name this sword and shield. Now we open her up, and you'll see here that we have a state configuration and the equipment instance class. This is here that way if you have your own instance class that you've made a child, if you made a child actor of this for your own stuff, you can change it. That's a very advanced topic that we definitely will not be covering in this series. So once we create a state configuration, the first thing we want to do is in the state tags. For now, we're going to set this to activated. When we go and make equip and unequip abilities for our weapons, then we'll change this to deactivated. Activated means it's going to start in the activated state. The next thing we need to do is come down here to the actors. We're going to hit the plus sign twice, and we're going to look for our sword example and our shield example. And we need to make sure that our sword example is this one. And the shield is the offhand. Now, just in case you don't remember where we did this, it was in the third party in the equipment slot weapon main hand. Equipment slot weapon main hand. So now you know how all of this is connected. Now in the future, once we get to this point, when we're creating abilities, we can now add them here. That way we can only activate them when the sword is in our hand. That kind of stuff. I thought that was cool. Same with the attributes, gameplay effects, and additional unique containers. That way if you have a backpack that has more slots, things like that. Think World of Warcraft in that instance. All right. So now that we have that done, we need to create the item definition for the sword and shield. We're going to come here, back to inventory, go into items, right click, and Ninja Bear Studios inventory, we need an item definition. So IDDA for item definition data asset. Again, name it whatever you would like. And I'll name this sword and shield. Now, I'm being very generic here. Obviously, if you're going to have a bunch of sword and shields, you would have sword and shield 1, sword and shield 2, things like that. Just not what I'm doing. Not yet, anyways. So we open this up, and this is where a lot of cool magic happens. I've messed with a lot of inventory systems, but they have not done what's happening here, at least not that I have found. It allows us to attach our own the information that we would like, and nothing more and nothing less to the item. And we can create our own fragments, and in the future we will do so. So we're gonna open this bad boy up. This fragment has now been opened. The first thing we want to do is the I want to make sure we get the right one first. User interface fragment. User interface fragment. And we name it what we want. I'm going to name mine sword and shield. Display type weapon. I'm not going to give it a description at the moment. And I do not have the UI stuff in here yet, so I'm going to be right back. I'm going to get that stuff in here. All right. For those that would like to know what I'm using, I have the 4K Full Fantasy GUI UI asset package that I am using. If you don't want to use any UI, you just want to put some generic image there so that you know that it's working when we go to the UI, then go for it. But for me, I like having stuff here. So I got a sword and shield here. I'm going to place that bad boy right there. All right. So the next step is going to be we're going to add a stack fragment. Before we continue on, I just want to point out there are quite a few of them here. According to the documentation, there are some of these that if you place, you need to make sure that they're in a certain order. You would need to dive more into that in the fragment section in the documentation to understand it, because fragments is not something I've messed with yet, but I do intend to mess with this stuff heavily for videos in the future. So the next thing that we need, like I said, was the stack fragment. And when we open it up, we have the stack limit of 1 and maximum limit. How many items can be carried in the inventory in total? So obviously, if you want this to be a massive number, then you can. I don't know if putting it to 0 means unlimited. It's something I'll reach out to Uriel about. But for now, assume that you need to just put like 10,000 or something. If you don't care if the same item is in the inventory multiple times. For the sake of the tutorial, we'll keep it 1 and 1. And when we go over this fragment again with things like consumables, then we'll touch on the other parts of this fragment. The next thing we want to do is a container fragment. Open this up, hit container, and preferred container query. So what we are looking for is where does this go? So this is a weapon container is what we're looking for. And then we want to choose all tags match. And we select inventory, container. We need to create a new one. Remember, select the source, and we'll name it weapon. And hit OK. So it is always going to prefer putting it in a container that is marked with inventory container weapon. If it can't, it'll go to other containers, and that is 100% okay. Now, the last fragment that we need for this instance is, open that up, equipment. And this is where we put our sword and shield. So this, and remember, this is what houses the actual actors. And this is really cool because that way, if you are making a game where most of the items in your inventory don't have a physical presence, you now don't have to have this stuff, which means that your data is lighter, which is really, really cool. All right, so now that we've created our equipment definition and our weapon definition, it's time to get to making our containers. So let's go ahead and open up the container drawer here. And we're going to go back to inventory and I could have sworn I had a third one here. I did. 1 second. I need to make sure things didn't break. I don't know why it's not there anymore. So if you ran into what I did, just recreate the folder. Now we can open it up. And we are going to right click and again in the Ninja Bear Studio stuff, look for container definition. So CDDA for me. And I'm going to name it backpack. And then I will open it up. So the display name is going to be backpack. And then for the gameplay tag, there is not an inventory.container.backpack. So we again click on this arrow, add subtag, make sure we have a source, name this backpack. Hit add new tag and select it. The next thing we want to do is also in here have this as the default bag. So if for the weapon, how it is looking for a certain slot, if it's no longer available, it's going to look for the next preferred container, which, unless you code differently, will be the default, which is what we're doing here. We're then going to set the priority to 100. So it'll always be the last thing. That way, if you have multiple weapon slots, it'll look for the next weapon slot, yada, yada, yada. Just important to remember. Now, you can hard code how many slots you have if you absolutely want to. You can also use the gameplay attribute system, which we are doing. We will want to look for backpack. Okay, backpack. When we do that, it's going to gray out slots. Now, if you remember, our slots is at 20. So we now have 20 backpack slots. All right, we'll hit save here. Now we're going to open this up and we're going to create another container. I'm just going to type, I don't want to be in blueprints. Container definition, CDDA, primary weapon. Now, the way that Uriel has it set up is you have your primary weapon, so a sword, shield, and then secondary weapon, so you'll put those away and have like a bow or a two-handed weapon. That's how he's setting up this this guide. In future videos, I'll show how to make it main hand, offhand instead of primary, secondary. But at the moment, that is irrelevant. So open that up. And then this one, we will name this one main weapon. And again, we'll go to items, container and equipment. That way, if there's an equipment container, it'll go there. And then we will also do add a subtag. Make sure we choose the source, container dot weapon dot primary. I foolishly hit enter, which closes it out, and then you have to reopen it. Yeah. And obviously we want this set to 1. Now, when we choose container.equipment, it grays out the slots. So that's important for you to know. The default state tag, if you recall me talking about the activated and deactivated, this is what I'm talking about. So when it's activated, it's going to automatically be activated, which means the weapons will automatically be in your hands. And in the future, we'll set it up to be start off as deactivated. The final thing we want to do is end the query here, item compatibility query. I'm going to open this up and change this to support weapons, all tags match, inventory item dot weapon. Excuse me. And we will hit OK here. And now we need to do the secondary one. So if we open this up, I'm going to save this real quick and I'm going to duplicate it to save some time here. It's not always the wise to duplicate. When you duplicate and things start acting weird, delete that duplication and create it manually. It's an Unreal Engine issue. Secondary weapon. And then we will change this. We'll add a subtag and it will be secondary. Add new subtag. Remove the primary, add the secondary. And priority 2. That means it's going to try to put it in the primary weapon slot before it tries to put it in the secondary weapon slot. All right. So the next thing we shall do, we're going to open this up and go back into inventory and in data, because why not? We're going to open this up. Oh, wait, no. Do I have 1 second? I need to check this. Just wanted to make sure we didn't have a place where that has to go, because it is a data asset. There is nowhere that it has to go, and that's what is lovely. So now we're going to right click. I'm going to type inventory. I'm trying to save some time here. Inventory layout. So ILDA inventory layout, because I don't have any creative way of naming it at the moment. We're going to keep it named inventory at the moment, and we'll hit plus 3 times. First one will be the backpack, and then the primary, and then the secondary. And we will hit save there. And now we need to configure the inventory management component. Everything we've done before we started working on the containers and whatnot was equipment, and then creating the items, and then the anyways, now we go up to our game mode, because this is, yes, we did that already, where they suggest to have it. The player state is where our inventory is going to be. Now, the reason we're doing that is because then everything in our inventory, if we change levels, will go with us. If we die and we come back and you have some sort of, free life scenario where you'll come back or get resurrected or whatever, you still have your items. You don't have to evaluate, or not reinitialize your items. It's all kept in the player state, which never dies. So we're going to go ahead and hit add and inventory manager. Okay. Now that we have the inventory manager, you'll see that we have this inventory layout that we have. We'll open that up and place that in there. Another thing that we need to make sure that we do is, yes, we do not have the interface. We need to come here to interfaces and add the inventory. Well, inventory. That's right. It's got a weird name. Let me. The documentation is not accurate on its name. 1 second. Okay. Inventory manager provider interface. The documentation will say inventory provider interface. Kind of a big deal. Anyways, the next thing we will do, let me pull that back up, is we need to do the get inventory manager. Place that in there. And now we also need to go back to our inventory manager and add some default items. Well, in this case, one. Open it up. Item data, our sword and shield. It is now added. Now if we hit compile and save, now if we did everything correctly, we hit play, looks like we did not because the sword and shield is not in our hands. Let me first hit F8. Scroll out. Nope, it is not right there. That is perfectly fine. Give me one moment to see where my problem is. All right, yeah. There were a couple things that we missed in previous episodes. That's fine. It all ties together, so it's perfect that I made the same mistake and for the exact same thing. All right, so we need our sword open, our sword example, our shield example, and we need the item data asset where we store the equipment data, where we did all the fragments. So look for your IDDA sword and shield, and you'll see gameplay tags, default, instance, and fragments. That's when you'll know you have the right data asset open. Right now it says inventory.item. If we look at the sword, it's .weapon. Same with the shield, .weapon. Now, obviously, we want to have these separated for the sake of what we're doing here. So we would, over here at weapon, add subtag. Make sure you have the source, and we can do sword and shield. Now, obviously, like I said, if you're doing them separate, then you can just do sword. Actually, we'll go ahead and do it that way. That's where we'll make some changes here. Add subtag. We'll make this one sword. No, we're in shield right now. Shield. Add new tag. Okay. Then we'll come here into the sword. Add subtag. Sword. Add new tag. And sword. Now then, in the IDDA sword and shield, we can add shield and sword. Hit save. Now when we hit play, bam, there they are. And they're placed exactly where we want them, exactly how they were in the combat. All right, that is everything we're doing for this episode. Sorry for it being a little bit longer. There was a lot to do to get everything integrated and set up correctly. In the next one, we will start getting the UI ready so that we can see our backpack space and see our weapon slots, and then we can go from there. Have a great day.